My name is Rachel. I'm 29 years old, and before this story begins, I want you to understand one thing about me. I am not, by nature, a vengeful person. I grew up in a quiet town where people waved to each other on the street, where you returned borrowed sugar with cookies a week later, and where I was taught to believe that kindness could disarm anyone. I held on to that belief like it was a shield. I was the friend who forgave the friend who forgot my birthday. I was the girlfriend who overlooked little flaws in a relationship because love means accepting imperfections. Right? At least, that's what I thought, until the Wednesday afternoon that kindness died inside me. It was mid-March, still cold enough that the wind burned my cheeks as I carried groceries from my car to the apartment. I remember thinking about how I was going to surprise Daniel, my boyfriend of 4 years, with his favorite dinner. He had been working late nights, and I thought a quiet evening together might help him de-stress. When I stepped inside, the apartment felt different. Not bad. Not good. Just off. There was music playing faintly from the living room. Not our usual playlist, but something soft and slow. I set the grocery bags on the kitchen counter, my keys still dangling in my hand, when I heard it. A laugh. Not just any laugh. Her laugh. Samantha. My best friend since college. The girl who knew every secret I had ever told anyone. The girl who helped me move into this apartment. The girl who used to call Daniel brother. I froze, my heart pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. I told myself they were probably just hanging out. Maybe she had dropped by while I was out. But there was something about the softness of that laugh, the way it melted into a low murmur of his voice, that made my skin prickle. I walked toward the sound, and then I saw them. Daniel's hands were in her hair, pulling her closer. Her arms were wrapped around his neck. They weren't just kissing. They were familiar. They were the kind of comfortable you only get from practice. Something in me snapped. I didn't scream. I didn't drop the groceries and demand an explanation. I didn't cry, not yet. I simply stood there, invisible to them in that moment, watching the two people I loved most in the world throw away everything I thought was real. When they finally noticed me, Samantha's eyes widened like a deer in headlights. Daniel froze mid-breath. He started to speak, some excuse, some lie he probably rehearsed in case this day came. But I didn't let him get a word out. "Finish what you're doing," I said quietly, my voice so steady it startled even me. "Because when you're done, you're both going to wish you'd never met me." That night, I didn't sleep. I lay awake in the guest room, staring at the ceiling while the echo of their betrayal replayed in my head. My brain refused to process it in a straight line. Instead, it jumped between moments like a cruel slideshow. The time Samantha held my hair back when I was sick. The time Daniel cried in my arms when his father died. The time we all laughed together over wine, promising that nothing could ever break the three of us apart. I could have screamed. I could have thrown his things into the street. I could have blocked them both and tried to heal quietly. But no. They had chosen to humiliate me in my own home. They had chosen to make me the fool in my own life. So I chose to become the villain in theirs. The first thing I did was smile. Not in front of them, that would have been too obvious. But when I woke up the next morning, the first thought in my head was, I am going to dismantle you both, piece by piece. I played the role perfectly. I told Daniel I needed space to think. And I told Samantha that while I was hurt, I wanted to hear her side. Both of them were desperate to justify themselves, so they fell right into my trap. They told me everything. Every lie they had told to keep their little secret alive. I learned that this had been going on for 8 months. 8 months of whispered texts, fake errands, and, "I'm just going to grab a coffee with Sam. She's having a rough day." 8 months of me planning birthdays for them both. Hosting dinners where they sat across from me and smiled like they were innocent. And every detail they gave me was another weapon for later. Over the next 3 weeks, I began my quiet war. Finances first. Daniel and I had a joint savings account because we were planning to buy a house together. I drained my half legally and moved it into a separate account. Then I canceled every shared subscription, bill, and utility in my name. Daniel had grown comfortable letting me handle those things. Now he would have to figure it out on his own. Social circles next. I started dropping subtle, calculated hints to mutual friends. Nothing outright, just a carefully placed comment here, a funny look there. I knew people would start putting the pieces together. By the time Daniel and Samantha realized what was happening, the quiet gossip had already turned into full-blown whispers. The final blow. Samantha had a big job interview coming up. I knew because she'd been bragging about it for weeks. The morning of her interview, I accidentally sent a screenshot, a very specific screenshot, of her and Daniel together to her fiancé, the one she'd been too scared to leave while she played house with my boyfriend. The fallout was immediate and devastating. Her fiancé threw her out. Daniel lost several friends in our group. Samantha didn't get the job because she was too busy putting out the fires in her personal life to even show up to the interview. And me? I walked away without raising my voice once. The last time I saw Daniel, he was standing in the parking lot of our apartment complex, holding a box of his things. "You didn't have to do all this," he said. I smiled. "You're right. I didn't have to. But you made sure I wanted to." And then I turned, got into my car and drove away. That's when I realized, revenge doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes the quiet kind leaves the deepest scars. Revenge, I learned, isn't a sprint. It's a marathon. The kind where you run at a steady pace, letting the other person think they've escaped, before catching up at the last possible moment, when they're too tired to fight back. After that night, Daniel and Samantha thought the worst was over. I could tell. Samantha sent me a message a few days later. "I hope one day you can forgive me. I didn't mean to hurt you." She didn't mean to hurt me. She meant every single thing she did. She just didn't expect to get caught. Daniel, on the other hand, avoided me. Not in an obvious way. He still sent polite check-ins, asking how I was doing. But I could sense his relief when I kept my responses short. He thought I was just trying to move on. He thought maybe I was being the mature one. He didn't know I was just waiting for the right time to twist the knife. I started small, little inconveniences that didn't look like my doing. Daniel had a monthly gym membership he loved. I called, pretending to be his assistant, and updated his profile with an old, expired credit card number. I knew he wouldn't realize until they locked him out mid-workout. Samantha had been selling handmade jewelry online as a side business. She'd leave her stock in her car after craft fairs. One rainy weekend, I left an anonymous tip on a local community board warning about break-ins targeting vehicles at craft markets. People panicked. Samantha's booth had almost no visitors, and the few that came tried to haggle her prices down to nothing. These weren't life-ruining blows yet. They were the equivalent of cutting small strings on a parachute. The real fall would come later. While I chipped away at their comfort, I was also building my leverage. You see, Daniel had a flaw. A big one. He loved taking photos. Not just the normal kind, but the risky, stupid kind you'd never want anyone else to see. He thought they were private, but he'd once shared his cloud storage password with me so I could upload vacation photos. I never told him I remembered it. And Samantha, well, she was careless. She'd sent messages to Daniel that would make a sailor blush, along with some unflattering opinions about people in our friend group. Things that, if shared, would turn her into a social pariah overnight. I copied it all. Every photo, every message, every timestamp. Weeks passed, and I kept playing the part of the healing ex-girlfriend. I went to brunches with friends. I posted photos of myself hiking, smiling, living life. I even liked one of Samantha's posts on social media, just to make her think I was softening. That's the thing about revenge. People let their guard down when they think you've moved on. By the end of April, they were comfortable again. Too comfortable. I saw Daniel and Samantha together at a mutual friend's barbecue. They laughed, they held hands under the table, and I could almost hear the unspoken "she's over it" in their smiles. They had no idea they were standing on a trapdoor. The first real strike came 2 weeks later. I sent an email to Daniel's workplace. Not from my account, of course. I used a throwaway. It contained several of the private photos from his cloud, along with the note. You might want to know what your employee is doing on company time. Daniel worked in a conservative office where reputation mattered. HR called him in the next morning. He wasn't fired yet, but his chance at a promotion evaporated overnight. Samantha found out when Daniel confided in her. I know this because she called me that same day, voice shaking, asking if I had done it. I smiled into the phone. Why would I do that, Sam? I told you I'm moving on. But I wasn't done. That night, I took the folder of screenshots, the ones with her trash-talking our friends, and I sent them anonymously to the group chat she wasn't in. The effect was instant. I woke up the next morning to see her blocked by half the group, and the other half publicly calling her out on social media. She tried to defend herself. She said the messages were taken out of context. But the damage was done. People didn't want context, they wanted drama. And she had just become the villain of the week. By now, Daniel and Samantha were isolated. The friends who used to invite them to dinner nights forgot to include them. The ones who stayed in touch were only there to watch the slow wreckage unfold. And I wasn't even close to finished. The best part? They still had no proof it was me. By the start of May, Daniel and Samantha were still together. But the shine was gone. You could see it in the way they avoided eye contact when anyone mentioned trust or honesty. You could hear it in their voices. Clipped, defensive, tense. They weren't the smug couple who had stolen something from me anymore. They were two people holding on to each other out of fear that without the other, they'd drown. That's the thing about betrayal. It doesn't just ruin the relationship with the person you hurt. It plants a seed of paranoia that grows between the two people who did the hurting. And my job now was to water that seed until it split them apart from the inside. The first step was Daniel's finances. We had once shared an Amazon account, and he never changed the password. He had credit cards saved there. One afternoon, I logged in and ordered about $300 worth of ridiculous items: neon wigs, inflatable flamingos, and a life-size cardboard cutout of a 1980s wrestler. I shipped every single thing to his office with "Happy Retirement, Dan" on the packing slips. It wasn't enough to hurt him financially. It was about humiliating him. When his coworkers saw the mountain of absurd packages, the jokes started, and they didn't stop. A week later, I made a quiet phone call to his landlord, pretending to be a concerned neighbor. I mentioned that I had heard loud, suspicious arguments late at night and that things were being thrown. I didn't need to make it dramatic. Just planting a seed of doubt in the landlord's mind was enough. Suddenly, Daniel had a surprise inspection notice pinned to his door. While Daniel was sweating over that, I moved on to Samantha. Samantha worked part-time as a children's art instructor at a local community center. I created a fake parent email and wrote to the center claiming that my child had come home upset because the teacher used inappropriate language and seemed angry with the kids. Again, not enough to outright get her fired, but enough to force a formal review. And when you're already stressed and isolated, that kind of pressure starts cracking the surface. Sure enough, the next time I saw them, purely by coincidence of course, they weren't holding hands. They weren't even walking together. But I wasn't here for cracks. I wanted collapse. That's when I brought out the insurance policy, the folder. I printed 3 of the most incriminating photos from Daniel's cloud. Not the worst, but bad enough to suggest there were more. I slipped them into an unmarked envelope with a note that read, "I wonder if Samantha's parents would enjoy seeing the rest." I mailed it to Samantha's house, addressed only to her. You'd be amazed at how fast suspicion spreads when one person thinks the other is holding a ticking time bomb. Within days, they were fighting openly in public. At a coffee shop, I saw Samantha slam her drink on the table and hiss, "I told you to delete them." Daniel's face went red, and he stormed out, leaving her sitting there with trembling hands. 2 days later, I got a late-night text from an unknown number. "If this is you, you've made your point. Please stop." I didn't reply, but the final blow had to be something permanent. Something they couldn't recover from. Daniel had an upcoming job interview, one that could have been his ticket out of the mess. I made sure the hiring manager received an anonymous email containing screenshots of him trashing his current boss to Samantha in those old messages. As for Samantha, I submitted an anonymous review of her craft business on 3 different forums, complete with fake customer names, claiming she had taken payment and never delivered items. Orders slowed to a crawl. By the end of June, Daniel was unemployed, Samantha's side business was dead, and they were barely speaking to each other. They didn't break up right away. No, that came 2 weeks later when Samantha moved back in with her parents. Daniel, left alone in their shared apartment, sent me one last message. I don't know how you did it, but you won. I hope you're happy. I didn't answer him either, because I was happy. I hadn't just taken revenge. I had taken everything. The strangest thing about revenge is that the loudest part isn't the act itself. It's the silence that follows. When everything was done, when Daniel had no job, when Samantha had no business, when their relationship had rotted to the core, there was no triumphant music. No movie-style ending where I stood on a mountaintop in victory. There was just stillness. I remember walking through the grocery store one late afternoon, picking up milk and bread like any other day. That's when I saw Daniel in the checkout line ahead of me. He didn't see me. His hair was unkempt, his clothes wrinkled. He had a half-empty cart. No big grocery haul, no luxury snacks. Just a few basics and a single instant ramen pack tossed on top. He scanned his card twice before it went through. I thought I'd feel a rush of satisfaction seeing him like that. Instead, I just felt empty. Not regret. Not guilt. Just a deep, cold quiet in my chest. A week later, I spotted Samantha by accident too, walking briskly down the sidewalk, sunglasses on despite the cloudy sky. She was on the phone, voice tight, saying something about needing the money by Friday. Her shoes were scuffed. Her nails, once perfectly manicured, were chipped. She didn't look like the girl who had laughed behind my back all those months ago. She looked small. And I kept walking. Friends who knew the whole story would sometimes ask if it was worth it. If the late nights planning, the quiet sabotage, the constant patience had been a waste of my time. I never told them the truth, that it wasn't about worth. It was about balance. They had taken something from me that couldn't be replaced. Trust. Friendship. The belief that love was safe in my hands. So I took something from them that couldn't be replaced either. I didn't need them to say my name when they thought about how their lives had unraveled. I didn't need them to know how many of their failures were planted by my hand. The beauty of the perfect revenge is that it doesn't require applause. It thrives in the quiet, in the unseen. By the time summer ended, Daniel had moved back in with his mother. Samantha was working at a job she hated, far from the city. And me? I had moved into a new apartment, started fresh. Sometimes at night, I'd catch myself wondering if they ever sat alone and realize that I had been the storm they never saw coming. And then I'd smile to myself in the dark. Because some victories don't need to be spoken. They just need to be felt.